Small changes in your mindset can translate into daily habits that compound over time. Now, January is a time that we look at making changes in our lives. And I've said before that I'm not good at the big sudden shifts. For me, it's about those small changes that over time can have a bigger impact. Those little practical changes that compound over time. Now, I read Atomic Habits and the Power of Habits a few years ago, and they stuck with me, partly because I knew it was true, as I'd already gone through a transition of my own. My walking story, I like to call it. See, back in 2019, I knew something needed to change, and I started an MSc in psychology. It was no small investment, not just the cost, but the time that I was putting into it as well. I changed job to go part-time, and I was going to university for a full day of lectures every week. I was learning a lot of new things, meeting new people, and I was loving it. I was on a pathway to a new career. Then along rolls March 2020, and things grind to a halt. Now, I've been the same weight all my adult life until I had kids. And then I was the same weight again, just 1 stone heavier. I thought that was a fair exchange for 3 kids, but in 2020, I was hit by that perfect storm: global pandemic, social isolation, and menopause. And the pounds started to go on, and they carried on going on. There didn't seem to be an upper limit. I was in a fairly interesting position in the middle of a psychology degree. I was able to monitor the impact that all of this was having on my well-being and my mental health. I was, in short, doing a lot of navel gazing, and that navel was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I was doing an essay on personality traits that spring. I'd carried out a psychometric test in March 2020 called the Big Five. It's got an acronym: OCEAN: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, I've always had a good dose of neuroticism, but my lead trait was openness, characterized by imagination, curiosity, wide interests. And these traits, they're meant to be fairly stable across the lifetime, changing only very slowly with big life events. But when I did the test again, just 3 months later, I saw a significant change. My openness had dropped away, and pushing strongly out into the lead was neuroticism, characterized by irritability, depression, a lack of confidence. I was, in short, becoming Auntie Edna. Now, we've all got an Auntie Edna. She's a person that you don't want to sit next to at Christmas dinner because she will suck the life out of you. All the fun will be gone. And I used to wonder, was she made like that, or did she become like that? And I was beginning to get my answer, because I too was becoming just like that. All I could see ahead of me was a deepening path of inflexibility, poor mobility, weight gain, ill health, neuroticism. I was on the cusp of the third age of life, a stage not all of us has the privilege to walk. And things, well, they weren't looking good. But what could I do about it? See, I had a belief, one about menopause and weight gain, that with hormonal changes comes increased weight, especially around the middle. I had reached a crossroads in my life. I had 2 visions of a very different future: the one with the poor mobility and ill health, and then a much brighter one, playing on the floor with potential grandchildren, adventures, holidays with my husband, a new career. I wanted to walk the Camino de Santiago, and all that seemed to be slipping from my reach. But what could I do about it? So 2020 rolls on, the weight rolls on, and we get to Christmas, and the third lockdown, the winter lockdown, the one that nobody enjoyed. It was bleak. Now, my friend Sam, she's a little fiery ball of energy. She says to me, "We've got to do something or we are going to go stir crazy." Now, she said, "Let's try walking." Well, there wasn't much else to do, was there? So I said, "Okay, but I'm not going to get up early and I'm not going far." So we went for a walk that evening. And at the end, Sam said, "Look, I can't do tomorrow evening. Could you do the morning instead? Just give it a try." See, what I didn't know at that time about Sam was that her fear of the dark was bigger than my fear of early mornings. So that night, I set my alarm for 7 a.m. I'd put out my leggings and my trainers because that's a good way to set intentions when you're starting a new habit. and we met at 7:30 and walked for 3 miles. And we've been walking most days ever since. Certainly in those pandemic days, we even did the weekends. And now, 5 years later, I've walked about 2,500 miles, and I've gone through about 8 pairs of trainers. Now, after a few months, I began to have some self-judgment about this. You see, I'd never been able to keep up an exercise regime before. It would always sort of just peter out after about 3 weeks. So I was a bit annoyed with myself. Why was I able to keep to a program for somebody else, put in effort for another person that I wouldn't do for myself? Well, luckily by now I'd finished my MSc in psychology and I'd moved on to becoming a specialist in transformative positive psychology. So I was able to get some answers for myself. It turns out I don't have much zest of my own. That's that internal engine, the manifesting generator engine. That get up and go, it just isn't there. I borrow it from other people, which looking back explains why social isolation was so difficult for me. Now, what I do have is a lot of teamwork and social intelligence. So I wouldn't let my friend down, and I knew that once we were out there, we'd be putting the worlds to right, having some laughs, getting our heads together, having fun, and I'd start my day off on the right foot. And it turns out it doesn't really matter what gets you out there as long as you are getting out there and showing up in your own life. In positive psychology, we call this towing, when a lead strength pulls along a strength that we're low in. So I got over myself. And I know what you're wondering, did I lose any weight? Well, the answer to that is a no. If anything, I put some on with a bit of muscle. But I was stronger and fitter than I had been in years. What I did lose was something more important. I lost one of my beliefs, a belief that there was nothing I could do about it, that I couldn't change. And I gained a new trust in myself, a faith that I could achieve the things that I set out to do. And with that new self-belief, I started a diet, the 5-2 diet, which I kept up for a year, and I lost 2.5 stone. And you'll be pleased to know that when I did redo the Big 5 test recently, openness was back as my lead trait. Now, if you want any support in looking at your habits and making those sort of changes, then get in touch. I'd love to have a talk with you.